Hello everybody, welcome back to Sports Cards Connections. Today a short video where we're going to talk about some of Topps printing patterns as we can try to piece it together for some of their older cards. You know, from the essentially the late 50s through 1973, they issued their baseball sets in like 6 to 7 series, and later in each season, as the later series started coming out, you would get updates. Players who would change teams, new pictures from spring training, things like that. The early series would be a real good reflection of the season before. And a lot of players that traded teams, some retired or whatever, might still be included because they were printing these cards in October, shortly after the World Series, and way ahead of the next baseball season. So we're gonna take a look at that, and I picked 1969. 1969 was exciting because you had 4 new Major League Baseball teams. First time and only time that's happened. So you had the addition of the San Diego Padres and the Montreal Expos, who are now the Washington Nationals in the National League. The Seattle Pilots, after only 1 year, unfortunately, became the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Kansas City Royals in the American League. So to provide those new teams with players, Major League Baseball held a draft. And so each of the established, at that time, 20 franchises could protect so many players on their 40-man roster. And then with each round or so, or pick or something, they could check off a few more that couldn't be selected. But players that were left unprotected are the ones that the new teams could select. The 2 new National League teams picked from National League teams, and the 2 new American League teams picked from American League existing franchises. So how can we figure out when Topps was going to press, what they were going to do? Probably a good idea in retrospect would have been if they had left the expansion teams until the later series. 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th series, especially from 5th through 7th, when they had updated pictures for a lot of players from that 1969 spring training. Well, that would have been great. They would have had players with the new uniforms. Well, there are some, but no, Topps included the expansion teams in all the series, so you would get some bizarre things. So let's take a look at the dates. We'll start with October 11th, 1968. So right after the World Series, the Astros traded pitcher Dave Giusti to the Cardinals. And then 3 days later was the expansion draft. On October 14th, the National League selected, and on October 15th, the American League selected. Well, so the Cardinals had Dave Giusti for 3 days, and then came the draft, and they didn't protect him, and the Padres took him. So Topps, being right on the ball, this is a first series card, and they have him pictured with Houston. Let's see if we can get that focus a little better. Pictured with Houston, but with the Padres. Now, if you check the encyclopedia or any other source online, baseballreference.com, etc., you'll find out that Dave Giusti never played for the Padres. In fact, Dave Giusti never was on a baseball field as a member of the Padres because he was then, St. Louis still wanted him, so they traded on December 3rd. They traded to get Giusti back. So what can we tell from that? Let's check on the back. What do we have? See, we say that the Cards acquired Dave from Houston last winter. Well, that's not true. It was right after the World Series in the fall. And then they lost him in the draft to the Padres, had to give up 4 men to reacquire Dave in December. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells us that the fronts were ready before the backs, because the back has the change to the Cardinals, and, you know, of course, the card should have said Cardinals, not Padres. In 69, they said Cards. And the little circle should have been yellow with red printing. Those were the Cardinals, looked like that. But they had the front already ready. So the front was ready, let's say, you know, somewhere at least around Thanksgiving or earlier, maybe mid-November, because he had gone in the expansion of the Padres, but they were able to change the text on the back. On the December 3rd trade, he goes back to the Cardinals. So let's keep that December 3rd date in mind. Next we have another guy, same situation, former American League MVP Zoilo Versalles. He was selected by the Padres off the Dodgers roster. This picture is with the Twins. He never played for the Padres. On October 21st, just a week after the draft, the Indians traded first baseman Bill Davis to the Padres for a player to be named later. Now, Davis appears on his record 5th multiplayer rookie card this year, picture with the Indians, but the cards with the Padres. And that player to be named later was Versailles. And on December 2nd, he gets shipped to Cleveland. So again, he never went to spring training at Padres or anything else. So the front has the draft, but there it is. Now, they said December 3rd. Cyclopedia says the trade was December 2nd. He goes to the Cleveland Indians. But the front was already done. So we got to have the front finished for the first series cards by, I'm saying, mid-November to Thanksgiving at the latest. And then they were able to adjust the text. But they were going to press with the first series cards before Christmas. So, again, another sample. Dick Schofield. Now, this picture is with the Pirates. That means it's minimum 4 years old, if not older. Since that time, he'd been with the Giants, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Cardinals. But that's just typical Topps of the time. And here we have Schofield, who had been with the Cardinals in '68. But what does it say on the back? Dick was traded by the Cards to Boston on December 3rd, again that date. So just after that, let's say they were doing the backs for the first series somewhere around maybe December 5th to 10th or so, and completing the cards in December for the first series. They didn't release them to the stores till, I think, February. I was in Little League at the time, and I'm trying to remember, maybe late January? I'm thinking February. Okay, when these came out, and here you had these three. These guys were never on these teams in 1969, and all three of their cards indicate they've moved on. But the cards on the front still have them on where they were in '68. Of course, the two expansions, they were never with that team at all. So when was the second series going to press? So the first series was released. The second series was going to press because, here we go, we have veteran catcher Clay Dalrymple of the Phillies. Really nice card. On January 20th, so we're not even in spring training yet, January 20th, he was traded to the Orioles. And Topps did something they almost never did. They stopped the presses. And changed the card. Now, this is a very rare occurrence for Topps. So my guess is it was early on in the print run, especially since, though neither card is rare, the Orioles card is far more common than the Phillies card. You can go on eBay, you can get the Phillies card, but before there was something called eBay, the Phillies card was hard to find. There was this local kid in our neighborhood who would sit on the sidewalk by the 7-Eleven with his doubles, and he would sell and trade, named Lou. He's a rather odd guy. But I remember walking by, and I glanced in his box, and I saw this Dalrymple. And of course, I had this one. And I was just dumbfounded. Well, the first print run is when the trade was made. So now what we got is the second series was being printed, at least the fronts were ready, by January, let's say mid-January. Now the back, they changed the text. So total different biographies, not the cartoon, but the biography. It just refers to his career with the Phillies on the Phillies card. But over here, we have, after 13 years in the Phillies organization, Clay was traded to the Baltimore Orioles on January 20th, 1969. So that they were able to change the back, obviously the front. So they decided to stop the presses, not like the first series where they didn't. They pulled this card, replaced it on the sheets with this card, a headshot with the Phillies, but now with the Orioles, and with the notation on the back. So the fronts were ready. We guess what? The fronts were ready maybe mid-November to late November for the first series. So let's say mid-January at the latest, a little earlier than that, probably the fronts were ready for the second series. But then they had this happen. So he was traded actually for Ron Stone, And Stone is on a rookie card, his third one, and they have him correctly traded to the Phillies for Dalrymple. This is a high number. This card is, I think, a 6th series. Of course, they got a picture of him with the Athletics with the hat airbrushed. And card number 576. So they had the trade corrected here. It was Stone for Dalrymple. It was a 1-for-1 deal. And so they did something very strange, creating the variation for these two cards. Now, taken in the expansion draft as well was slugging first baseman Don Clendenon from the Pirates. And, Topps, where they got the picture. That's his 1967 card with the Pirates, which means the picture was probably taken in 66, so minimum 3 years old, but hey, that never bothered Topps. This card is a high number, last series of 1967, so in theory it could have been taken spring 67, but that's irrelevant to this story. So anyways, you see where the picture came from. So Clendenon was selected by the Expos. The Pirates left him open for selection because they had a young guy named Al Oliver coming up, and Clendenon was taken. So he's drafted on October 14th by the Expos. What happened? Well, just 2 days after the Clay Dalrymple trade, the Astros and the Expos pulled a big trade. They sent Clendenon and Jesus Alou, who they had selected from the Giants. This is a first series card. Both went to Houston for Rusty Staub and $100,000. And Jesus, obviously, he never even went to training camp with the Expos either. He was right to Houston. And these custom cards that are available, you get beautiful things like this. That's how his card in '69 should have looked. This card shouldn't exist. There we go. So they went to Houston, but there's a problem. Clendenon said, I don't want to play in Houston, and he refused to report. Now, in the meantime, Topps did it again. They pulled the card. This time the text stays almost the same, except for the end. Don was drafted by Montreal and then traded to Houston last winter. Well, last winter was January 22nd. So now they've created another variation. Again, this is the harder one. It was in the first print run. This is the more common one. But he never played for Houston. He refused to report. Now, Rusty Staub was also a second series, and they got the trade in for Staub as well. So these two traded for each other in the second series. They corrected his card. They have him now, and it says, traded to Montreal on 1/22/69. So Rusty Staub, they never had an Astros version. They had, that's pictures with the Astros, but they had him with Montreal. So Clendenon refused to report. So this created a problem, and the variation stayed there, and he wouldn't report to training camp, so he got returned to the Expos. We'll get back to Clendenon momentarily. So we advance a few series along, and now we're in the 6th series, and we have Ron Davis here. Now, Davis had been selected by the Padres in the expansion from the Cardinals, but as you see, this is Pirates. What happened? Well, now we find by the 6th series, right at the end of training camp, on March 28th of '69, Ron Davis was traded by the Padres to the Pirates, and they were able to catch that. So just before opening day, like a week or 10 days before opening day, Topps was able to correct this from saying Padres to Pirates. Got another lousy headshot, but the team is right. And he was traded with Bobby Klaus, a veteran utility guy who'd been in AAA. His card said Padres. And then he was traded for Tommy Sisk and Chris Cannizzaro. Both their cards say Pirates. They were second series cards, and way before they were printed way before the trade happened. So into spring training, in the second to the last series, they were able to make changes. And it says, Pittsburgh swung a four-man deal with San Diego to obtain this fine outfielder. Yeah, so on they were still changing text on the back just before opening day with Ron Davis. Back to Clendenin. April 8th, just about opening day, the Expos sent Jack Billingham and another young pitcher, Skip Gwynn, to the Astros to complete the trade because Clendenin refused to report. So Billingham here almost played for the Expos. That picture's with the Dodgers, who they drafted him from. This is a first series card. So he never did. There are pictures of him with Montreal because he went all through spring training with them. But right at the end, he was ordered, he was the player sent to Houston instead. And so he goes to complete that trade with Skip Gwynn. Now, Gwynn is on a rookie card, and look, they got a picture of him with the Astros. Why? Well, again, this is a 7th series card. And they were able only not to get him with Houston instead of Montreal. But they actually have a picture of him with the Astros. Not the greatest one. Get that focus. There we go. But there it is. You can see the H-star logo. And so those two completed the trade. Now, apparently, this left a bad taste in Montreal's mouth. So on June 15th, they would end up trading Clendenin. And off he would go to the Mets, but we'll get that in a minute. Here's one more 7th series trade so you can see when they were able to make deals. May 19th, here's Dick Simpson. Every Topps card he has is a headshot. And he was an Angels phenom who they brought up at too soon at 18, 19 years old, and expectations got high, and he just bounced around 6 teams in like 7 years. But anyways, he'd gone to the Yankees, and he'd only played 6 games with them when they traded him to the expansion Seattle Pilots. So that was May 19th, and all it says is that he was obtained from Houston. So May 19th, in the 7th series, they weren't making changes anymore. So what does that tell? That they were done. The 7th series was finished. It was going to be released. Whatever was out there was out there. So that probably, that would be May 19th. So, probably no more changes were made to any cards after early to mid-April. That's when the final series was going to press. And so when it came out, Simpson's still with the Yankees, even though he spent 7 games. But due to our wonderful customs, voila. This is how Dick Simpson ended up with the Pilots, and finally a non-headshot for him. So now back to Clendenin. Then June 15th, the Expos trade him to the New York Mets for utility infielder Kevin Collins and a minor league pitcher, Steve Renko, who went from AAA to immediately into the Expos rotation. He's not on a 69 card. Here's his 1970. So Renko and Collins for Clendenin. And Clendenin, here's 1970. You could always tell a 69 picture because of the 100th anniversary of professional baseball patch. Every team had it. So Clendenin goes to the Mets. Well, how did that work out? This is the Miracle Mets. Here's Game 2 of the World Series. And Don Clendenin, who refused to report to the Astros, ends up getting traded to the Mets, is the MVP in the World Series, hitting 3 home runs in a 5-game series as the Mets upset the heavily favored Orioles 4-1. And this is his Game 2 home run. A 2-1 Mets win, I believe. Yep. And his home run in the top of the 4th was the first run. It's really weird. Clendenin and Dalrymple both end up, the 2 guys whose cards they changed, both ended up in the 1969 World Series. Clay Dalrymple went 2 for 2 for the Orioles, and Clendenin won the MVP for the Mets. So there you see some of the print patterns. 1969 baseball. You have the first series, the fronts being prepared in probably late October up to the 7th series when they were still making changes at the end of spring training. So it's a long, ongoing process. And eventually, of course, after 1973, they scrapped the series. They brought it back in recent years, but they advertised big in 1974. All one series available at one time. All 660 cards. Now, there are guys who will swear that they had all cards in 73. It turns out that is true. In certain sections of the country late in the season, Topps released packs that had all the series mixed together. Certain parts of the country got those. Most did not. They were still printed in series. And then that ended with 1973. For a long time after that, they were printing cards in like October, because it got so bad like 1980. You'll look, there's a few cards on the front that they had actually left those teams in 1979, and they still have them on it in 1980 because they had already printed the front. So that concludes our little look at that. Series cards it was tough for Topps. It became a 6 to 7 month ordeal to try and get it right, make changes, and they finally gave up on that, went with the one series format. So switching gears, for you guys who do a lot of through-the-mail autographs, you've probably heard it before, but never give up. 22 months. 22 months to get Mike Laga. And here he finally came back with a 91 and 92 BBM cards playing for the Hawks in Japan. And I was really happy to get these signed. I'd given up on them. Here I'm telling you, don't give up. I gave up. But they came back. Sometimes they do. My record was 8 years. Steve Freeman of the Buffalo Bills. He came back with a note, said, sorry, this got buried in a suitcase somewhere and I found it. A couple things have come in recently. I thought this was one of the most beautiful cards I've ever seen. This is Toshimichi Kunieda of the Chunichi Dragons. Second baseman, third baseman. And that's about 1949. And the color on this is just fantastic. I was really happy to get it. I was the only bidder. Never seen it before. Just thought it was a great card. And back is blank. Cardstock's really good, and it's almost full American size, 2.5 by 3.5. I also got some bromides, which that is as well, but the standard sepia colored. This is Kawakami, the Giants' great Hall of Famer. And then I got 4 Dragons cards that are unidentified, so I got a detective work on those. There's no writing on them for who they are. So that's typical, it happens. And I got a 74 Calbee of 3,000 hit, 500 home run man, Isao Harimoto, in the rare Fighters sky blue road uniform, which they only wore that year. And so I was really pleased to get this card. So that's it for this time. Hope you enjoy seeing these cards and taking a look at some of the printing patterns of Topps in the past. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.